Hey everyone. Everybody, hello, hello. So glad to see you all here for day 2 at Config 2023. I'm Sebastian, a designer advocate, aka Figman, from Figma, based in Potsdam, which is in Germany. Thank you. It's close to a small little town called Berlin, which you might have heard of that one. I just started working at Figma in the beginning of this year, and I can't believe I'm now standing on this stage in front of all of you at Config 2023. The past few years, I've actually watched this from my sofa at home, and now I'm here. So I'm just excited to be here. Thank you. If you do have any questions or want to say hi, find me anywhere in the space other than right now. But I'll be down here, basically, and come talk to me, say hi. I would be grateful to talk to you. All right, let's get right into it. I hope all of you got some good rest last night after seeing all the feature announcements in the keynote we did in the morning, all the improvements to auto layout, including wrapping, dev mode, advanced prototyping, and by any chance, did anybody dream of variables? I know I did for the past 6 months. And then we had the whole day packed with amazing talks by great speakers, and I thought that last closing talk by Holly just took it home. This morning, we already started the day with an amazing AI keynote, and I hope you're all excited to get started with day 2. Yes, show some excitement. As you explore and make your way around config for day 2, we encourage you to share your adventure on social. Use the hashtag config2023 on Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you hang out on the interwebs. All right, let's kick off our first session for day 2, shall we? Joining us all the way from Hamburg, Germany, we have Yung-Ching Chiu, a senior product designer at Grammarly. Prior to Grammarly, she worked at a ride-pooling service from Volkswagen, solving some tricky challenges between perception of users and technical reality. Yung is a passionate detacher of instances and thinks experience is more important than systems sometimes. She's here to delight us all with a playful, hands-on talk about designing for the edge cases. Please welcome to the stage, Yung-Ching Chiu.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. So nice to see so many beautiful faces here. Today, I want to talk about everything, everywhere, all at once, designing for edge cases. Now, before I jump into my topic, I also want to give you an overview of me as a human being. So hi, my name is Yung, and I'm born and raised in Taiwan. I have been living in Germany for 10 years. I love Asian food, so Japanese or Korean, they're all my favorite. I'm not really an outdoorsy person. So in fact, if I can choose between cozy out in my couch or going out there doing outdoor activities, I always choose the former. In fact, I think beach vacation is overrated. I'm also very good at picking up new hobbies and giving them up. For example, I learned longboard a year ago, haven't picked it up since 6 months, learned guitar during COVID, learned one song and never touched it again. And the same story goes with my eating. But for product design, I stick around a bit longer. It's already 8th year of me working as a product designer, and I have the feeling that it will last. As you can see coming out from my background, when I see this movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, it kind of resonates me. So first of all, anyone see this movie before? Yeah, cool. Yeah, for those who didn't see the movie before, you might want to cover your ears for the next 3 minutes because there might be some plot involved. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once is talking about an Asian immigrant living in the United States. She's struggling with many aspects of her life. So relationship with her husband, with her daughter, and also financial crisis with her own business. Until one day, she discovered that she has the ability to harvest all the power that she has as herself in parallel universes. So for example, there are universes where she's a Kung Fu master. She has a very strong pinky, so she can fight out her enemy from the pinky. There are universes that she's just a rock, so everybody is a stone in that universe. There are universes that everybody has sausage finger, so they are not really good at using their fingers, but they're really good at using their feet. As a product designer, my first thought after watching this movie was, what if one day human being has the ability to travel through universes while carrying a device with them? How do we, as a product designer, design for a product that can be used in different universes? And it also kind of opened up the whole boxes about all the possible edge cases out there. For example, in the rock universe, you might have poor internet or no internet at all. In a sausage finger universe, people might tend to have very sloppy tap behavior because they couldn't control their finger. And in the Kung Fu Master universe, maybe people are very used to one finger tap behavior because they're particularly strong in that finger. So how do we design for all those cases out there? There's a quote from Everything Everywhere All at Once. It says, you underestimate how the smallest decisions can compound into significant differences over a lifetime. I think this is very much true for designing for edge cases. Because you can see in the previous example, just a tiny little shift of environmental factor can really shift our user behavior to an extreme parameter that cannot be expected. So how do we design for edge cases? Let's start by understanding and get a common ground on what is the definition of an edge case. But before we do so, let's also understand what is not an edge case. I also want to make it clear that edge case is not equal to accessibility. So edge case means that a scenario that's unexpected and infrequent, but ensuring edge case will ensure the reliability and functionality of our product. While accessibility is the fundamental aspect of your product development, but ensuring accessibility will ensure that our product is inclusive and that it can be used with all the people, regardless of their disability. So what is an edge case? Wikipedia says an edge case is a problem or situation that occurs only at extreme operating parameter. It can be or cannot be expected. I also asked everybody's best friend right now, ChatGPT. It says an edge case refers to a scenario or use case that occurs infrequently, unexpectedly. Let's put this into example on a scale. Assume that today, you as a product designer, you are designing for a login for an e-commerce website. Then your happy path might be that your user logging to their account on your platform via their password and email inbox. What is less ideal will be unhappy path here, that your user forget their password, and hence they click on this forget password button that you usually have on the interface, and then we send them the new credential via their email inboxes, and hence they can create a new password via the email inbox. In this case, the edge case might be that your user forget their password, but they also forget how to log into their email inboxes, and hence they cannot receive the new email credential. So you can see here that edge case is really pushing your system to its limits, and it really can be unexpected and also infrequent. So before that, we talk a lot about the expectation, the prediction of edge cases. Then the big question here is, how do we identify an edge case? So here, I want to explain this concept based on a real-life scenario. A couple months ago, I was designing for a feature we call a voting feature. So it's quite straightforward. Basically, we ask user a statement. Here, is Figma the best design tool? Quite controversial. If user agree, they will click thumbs up. But if they don't agree, they will click thumbs down. So our flow goes with, if user click on thumbs up, then we will show them a positive animation to reflect on the interaction that they just did. But if user disagree with this statement, we will show them a questionnaire to ask for more details regarding why they disagree with this statement. It is quite straightforward, right? As it seems, like thumbs up, we provide animation, thumbs down, we will have a question there. Is it though? In order to understand it, if it's a straightforward feature or not, we have to start by understanding what is happening in the background. So what happened here after user click on the thumbs up is that our front end brings this piece of data back to the back end, and then we talk to the back end. Back end say, yes, I received this data, I acknowledge this. Then front end bring back this piece of acknowledgement back to the front end, and hence this animation or blue thumbs that you see in the background. But as you can imagine here, there's a lot of talking back and forth, a lot of communication going on, and that requires one important factor, that is internet connectivity. So our first unhappy case here will be, what if user has poor internet? In this case, we cannot ensure either our backend has received this data. We also cannot ensure what kind of message we should provide to the user in the end. So as a designer, we came up with two different approaches. Either we are totally being transparent about our poor internet condition, or we just lie to the user. We don't care. In this case, there's two design approach. And we assume that this poor internet is going to take 3 seconds to load. And notice that the top rectangle bar will represent a 3-second progress bar. So what happens when user tap on the thumbs up? In the 100% be honest approach will be, after they tap on it, we show them a loading state. After we know that the code has went through, then we show them an animation. In the other approach, in the little lie approach, once user tap on the thumbs, then we don't care. We just show them this animation, and then we kind of hide this loading process in the background. Then we're asking ourselves, which version will be better? Which version will have a better user experiences? In order to decipher that, let's look at our edge case here. So the edge case in this place here will be that your internet is totally gone, that everything will fail. So let's take a look again at the 100% transparency version. After user click on the thumbs, then we show them a loading state, but then we know that it has failed in the background. Then we push back to this arrow messages. But with the little lie version, once user click on the thumbs, we already show them an animation. But later on, we realize, oh, it has failed. Then the thumbs will change into a different state. Then again, we're asking ourselves, which version should we go for? Which version will be better? And it also kind of opened up the whole boxes about all the possible questions that we have out there. For example, should we be transparent about the loading time? What about animation? Should it be played immediately? Do we need error messages? Do we want to reset the thumbs or not? Etc. So we're kind of stuck in the bottleneck here. As a product designer, one of the methods that I really love to use when I'm stuck in the bottleneck is to simply copycat other people. And also we have advantage here because this voting feature is quite commonly seen out there. They are heavily used in many different products. So let's check what other people are doing. So I kind of scope up 3 products that heavily use this voting feature, namely Netflix, YouTube, and Instagram. Netflix has this thumb icons under their overview page of all the series and movie. YouTube also have this upvote and downvote feature. Instagram, you can like the post by this heart icon. And this is a phone recording screen from my device. Also, I already put my phone into flight mode, so none of this screen has reached internet connection. So let's look at how Netflix do it. Netflix, you can click on the thumbs. The thumb will be reflected on their interface. Once I put back to my internet connection, it's still there. I jump back, and I jump in again. Then you can see the thumb status will be reset. Take a look at YouTube. Once I click on the thumb, there will be an error message show up in the bottom. Then I put back my phone into internet connection. Then you can see that the thumb status has been reset as well. Instagram is quite straightforward. So you can click on the heart how many times you like, but the heart will simply not be reflected on the interface. So you can see that everybody's handled this thing a little bit slightly differently. Everyone has immediate animation feedback, but some has error message, some doesn't. And also, they also handle it a bit different with the thumb status reset. Then after we see all those great references out there, let's go back to our product. How do we make our design decision based on the nature of our product? What I really like to do is also to make some user assumption. Let's take a look again at our first big question, when to play animation. If you look at the previous references, and also based on the assumption that we think user will want an easy and fast interaction, and also based on this feature is quite straightforward, and hence we decide for immediate animation feedback. The second question regarding error state, we assume that our user wants transparency on the outcome, and hence we decide that we will provide an error state. Regarding thumb status resets, based on the same assumption that we had before, and therefore we decide for immediate status reset. Then you can see here that we have 3 big pillars of our design decision. But is that all? Is that something that we decided as a designer we can already go for implementing it? We also have to consider what is technically feasible. So as a product designer, we have some idea that, for example, what if we can do auto retry? Like if we know like a user already clicked on the thumbs up and it has failed in the background, we just keep trying and trying until the code went through. Can we do that? Probably yes. But maybe it's going to take your developer 4 weeks to implement it. You always have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Put it on the leverage of a user value and the effort that you have to make. Therefore, you can see that our winning version here, when everything is well, internet connection is smooth, nothing went wrong, then after user click on the thumbs up, we simply show that animation. But in our edge cases here, if there's no internet connection, then we also show user an immediate animation, but once we know it has failed, then we will follow up by error message together with a thumb status reset. From the previous example, what I learned the most about designing for edge cases is really the mindset of stay open to different use scenario and use cases out there. In the beginning, when I'm designing for the feature, what I have in mind is really quite straightforward. Thumbs up, we show animation. Thumbs down, we show questionnaire. For me, it's like a 3-screen feature. But while along the way, talking to all the stakeholders, talking with the developer, we realized that there are so much more screens that we did not cover. Do we need an error message? How the error message looks like? Should it be a toast message? Should the error be reflected on the thumb? What about slow internet connection? Do we need a loading state? Do we want to provide user possibility to retry from their side, etc.? So you can see that those 3-screen feature has also expanded to much more screens out there. In my experiences, it's really hard to identify all edge cases at once. Instead, be open to all the use cases and include the edge cases iteratively. I also want to emphasize on the word iteratively. Why? Because it really helps you with convincing your stakeholder. Let's take a look again at this visual here from a 3-screen feature, and it has expanded unexpectedly. When you presented this screen to your stakeholder, they probably already have an expectation in mind, especially with the PM, that they want to ship this feature as soon as possible. But while you, as a designer, you can't increase the scope of the feature along the way, then it is inevitable that the deadline for releasing this feature will be postponed as well. So how do we convince people to prioritize edge cases? You probably see this kind of visuals a lot, that people are putting a business need on the same scale with user need. Especially in this case, because edge cases does not quite straightforwardly seems to have a lot of business value. So how do we convince people to prioritize edge case? Is first of all by telling them what is the value for us to prioritize edge cases. I want to use our previous example again, this handling internet error connection design as an example. What would be the value for us to prioritize those error messages and thumb status reset? World Data Lab estimates that there are around 1.1 billion people living in internet poverty today. Now, in order to understand this piece of information, let's start by understanding what does it mean, internet poverty. Internet poverty means that people who's living below 1.5 gigabyte per month with a minimum download speed rate of 3 Mbps. So 1.5 gigabyte give you around 40 minutes per day to browse through standard website, while 3 Mbps is gonna take around 6 seconds to load a standard website. So I, for one, already think that this index is quite tolerant because I do use internet more than 40 minutes per day, and I do not have the patience for a website to load longer than 6 seconds. So we can easily assume that there are more than 1.1 billion people who's living in the less ideal internet condition nowadays. But is this piece of data relevant for your product? You have to start by asking yourself, who is your target audience? Let's say my voting feature is only used in metropolitan cities like New York or Berlin, then maybe handling those internet error cases might not be your main concern. But if you're designing for a global product like Facebook, then those 1.1 billion people is also part of your business value because they're also part of your user. Second thing about convincing people to prioritize edge cases is really don't try to do everything all at once. Instead, prioritize you as a product designer, what will be your must-haves or what will be your nice-to-haves. Using the voting feature previously as example again, that, for example, maybe I think that thumbs-up animation is the most important, then let's prioritize that, followed up by showing the error message, then followed up by thumb status reset. So really to do things iteratively. Don't try to do everything as a big chunk of feature. People often view that edge case as a big stumbling stone along their way to reach the MVP. But what I want to encourage is really to break down this big stone into tiny little pieces. Maybe I think error cases is essential. Then after I implement that, I can already shift my product out for MVP version. Then later on, include your status reset. Again, do things iteratively. Third thing about convincing your people to prioritize edge cases is really to include people along the way. I cannot overemphasize on the importance of sharing, and I do think that there's no such thing as oversharing. Why? Because by including your people along the way, you put them in the same common ground. You are being transparent about your design process, about how you discover your edge cases, and it makes communication, and most importantly, negotiation so much easier in the future. So to sum up again, that how do we prioritize people to, how do we convince people to prioritize edge case? It is first of all telling them what is the business value in it for us to prioritize them. Then we slice them down into small iterations that we can shift it down easily. And third thing is a mindset that remember to include your stakeholder along the way. Now, the previous case that I show is more at edge cases that we discover from technical perspective. I also want to show an example of an edge case that we kind of discover from an unusual user perception. A couple months ago, I was working in a ride-pooling services in Hamburg, so shout out to all my Moya friends out there. We're designing for a feature we call trip summary, namely that we want to provide user a summarize of their trip after they are delivered. So we are slicing the trip summary down into two different variations. Either your trip is on time, or if your trip is delayed. If your trip is on time, then we tell you your pickup time. We also tell you your arrival time. Follow up by curated messages and graphic. If your trip is delayed, then we tell you your pickup time. We tell you your estimated arrival time, follow up by the actual arrival time, and also together with the message and graphic. After designing this, we're thinking, yeah, trip summary, probably on-time delay, we probably cover them all. So then we release this feature, and it reached to the user. But what we observed, though, is this screen here. What is this wrong with this screen is, let's take a look closely. We show them a pickup time. We show user your estimated arrival time, and their actual arrival time, which is earlier than the estimated arrival time. But from our system's definition, as long as your trip is earlier than the estimated arrival time, this is the on-time trip for us, and hence the on-time message and on-time graphic that you see here in the trip summary. However, that when our users see this screen, they were complaining to us that, hey, what do you mean my trip is on time? My trip is early, it's not on time. FYI, this is a German product, so our German customer is being very precise. Yes, so there are two underlying problems in this interface here. One, yes, we simply do not acknowledge this situation. We didn't tell them that this is an earlier trip. And second, as you can imagine, that there are probably some calculation missing in the background that we're not being precise enough. We're kind of underselling ourselves. But you can imagine, for the second problem, it could require a bigger effort to fix it. And therefore, as a quick fix, we simply put this into a new definition. And when your trip is earlier than the estimated time, then we give you a different message together with a different graphic. So you can see here what we expected in the beginning, like a binary trip summary, has also expanded to some use cases that we did not imagine before. I think this is also a really interesting case. You can see that what we define technically is really different from how users perceive. In this case, how users perceive on time is really not what we define on time in the code. And also that edge cases is not only technical. It's not only those 404 page not found pages that you see out there, but it can be also a perception that you did not expect before, or it can happen infrequently. So you're probably asking yourself that because the previous example we kind of discover after our feature is released. So is it possible for us to identify edge cases a little bit earlier before those things reach out to the user? I always like to slice down development cycle into 3 key timestamps. So before, during, and after. Before development means the phases that you're still doing user tests, design discovery. During development means like your developer is already actively working on it, putting your design into the code. After development means that when your feature is released. So how do we identify edge cases before development? It is by mapping out your user journey and also observing how users behave around your design during the user test. Take a look at an example of those voting feature before. This is the user journey I map out roughly. By mapping those out, you can kind of see that, OK, this will be the main string that my user will take. And by knowing that, you also have a basic idea of what if user take the other path, then you can kind of catch up the possible edge cases that can happen during this user flow. During development, it is important to understand what's the underlying architecture. Again, with the same visuals I showed before for the voting feature, by understanding what happened after you click on thumbs up, you can also have a basic idea of what might be the possible technical error there, and also come up with the possible solution. After development, it is important to keep your eyes open for user feedback. Observe if there are certain feedback that you didn't imagine before, if there are certain behavior that's not designed the way that you want people to interact with your design. And hopefully, we can catch all the edge cases that's out there. But what I want to say that as a designer, we probably want to cover as much edge cases as we can, because we want to design for a product that's perfect or that can be super user-friendly. But what I want to say is that those 2 cases that I showed before about poor internet connection, about unusual user perception, is really just the tips of the iceberg in the world of edge cases. There can be so much more out there. For example, unusual input. For example, if I put it into Mandarin character in an English-supported only app, or that if people cannot always afford the flagship hardware out there, or people who's living in extreme conditions like extreme cold, extreme heat. If we want to cover all of them, it can be really overwhelming. So what I want to say is that it's OK to say no to certain edge cases that you discover out there. you always have to leverage between how much effort you have to make in order to come up with a solution against what is the user value in it. Take an example of those hard-dated outwear. You probably see this statement a lot in different products. So they say something like, in order to use our services, you need to have OS system of XYZ. By drawing this line, they definitely lose some user out there, because we definitely still have some user who's using an older OS system. But considering how much effort we need to put into maintaining an older version, it is OK to draw your boundary to consider your limitation. When in doubt, when you discover edge cases and you don't know if you want to include it or not, always ask yourself questions like, how many users will be affected by this edge case? Does it have a significant impact on your user experiences? How long does it take for you to come up with a solution? Also, I want to mention that it is really easy to dig into the rabbit hole while we are designing for edge cases. But don't forget to set your focus right. Always start by happy path, because this is your core user experiences. This will be the user flow that most of your users will experience. Then we can see about unhappy path, then in the end, edge cases. Now let's close this talk with some takeaways. First, how do we identify edge cases is by staying flexible, staying open to different scenarios and use cases, and try to include them along the way as much as you can. If we decide to prioritize edge cases, it's important to tell people, what is the business value in it? Why do we decide to include it? If we decide to prioritize in edge cases, then let's slice it down by smaller iteration. Instead of always shipping out your feature with a big bang, let's slice them down into digestible chunks. Use different methods to discover edge cases along your development cycle, to keep an eye open for all the possible edge cases out there that can exist in different design processes. Last but not least is to always remember to leverage user value and the feasibility in you or development when evaluating edge cases. I want to close my talk with one of my favorite quotes from Everything Everywhere All at Once. It says, every new discovery is just a reminder that we're all small and stupid. This might sound really depressing, but this is very much true and what I feel along the way to design for edge cases. Because every new cases I found, I feel like, yeah, I did not think about that. And there are so many things that's outside of my imagination. And it really reminds me that we, as a human being, that we do not know everything. So stay humble, but stay edgy. Feel free to check out all the references that I have. Thank you, Figma, especially Yulia and all my friends.